In the mid-20th century, a shocking truth began to emerge from the shadows of American society. Kinsey's groundbreaking research revealed secrets that many thought were too private, too taboo to discuss openly. What he found was not just different from what most people believed, but incredibly different. His work forced society to face its own hidden desires and behaviors head-on. Dr. Alfred Kinsey, a professor at Indiana University, decided to study human sexuality in a way no one had before. He didn't just talk to people in hushed tones or behind closed doors. He asked thousands of volunteers about their sex lives, something that was unprecedented at the time. But here's the thing, these volunteers were mostly students and people Kinsey personally knew. Many wondered, could these people really represent everyone? Critics quickly jumped on this. They said Kinsey's sample wasn't real, just a small, not-so-diverse group. They feared his findings would shake the very foundations of American values, and they were right. Kinsey's research showed that what was considered normal sex was way more varied than anyone had thought. This was a big deal. Back then, society had strict rules about sex. Homosexuality was illegal, and having affairs was seen as deeply wrong. But Kinsey found that these behaviors were far more common than people wanted to admit. It was like he had uncovered a secret diary that everyone thought was locked away forever. The American public was not happy. Life magazine called Kinsey's work an assault on the family. They said it went against moral laws and celebrated what many saw as immoral acts. For many, Kinsey was seen as a threat to the traditional values they held dear. His research suggested that both men and women were equally sexual, a thought that was revolutionary and deeply unsettling. Critics, mostly from religious groups, argued that Kinsey was promoting immorality. One minister even said Kinsey was leading people to mingle with the cattle and become one with the beasts of the jungle. It was a harsh attack, but it showed how scared people were of the truth Kinsey was revealing. Despite the backlash, Kinsey pressed on. His second major work, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, published in 1953, dug deeper. It showed that women had desires just as strong as men's. This was a big deal because, for a long time, women's sexuality was ignored or dismissed. The TV evangelist Billy Graham called Kinsey's work a promotion of immorality. It was a fight that went beyond science into the heart of American beliefs. Kinsey's research didn't happen in a vacuum. The 1940s and 1950s were times of change, but also of deep conservatism. Popular songs of the era reflected a more open view of sex, even if they didn't always say it directly. Songs like Cole Porter's Let's Do It from 1928 compared sex to animal mating, while other tunes hinted at prostitution and post-war sexual excitement. Ella Fitzgerald's song Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered hinted at the excitement of sex after a long separation, written by a man who was likely gay. Noel Coward openly hinted at his sexuality in his songs, though he never confirmed it directly. Even George Formby, a popular comedian, used double entendres in his songs. The black blues and R&B scene was even more straightforward. Artists like Leadbelly, Winnie Harris, and Billy Ward sang about sex openly, without apology. These songs were popular, showing that many people were already thinking and talking about sex in ways that challenged the status quo. Undeterred by the criticism, Kinsey kept going. His research into women's sexuality was even more controversial. He pointed out the double standards in society, showing that women were just as sexually motivated as men. This was a radical idea at the time. Billy Graham and other religious leaders attacked him fiercely, saying he was leading people astray. Despite the opposition, Kinsey's work had a profound impact. It helped pave the way for the sexual revolution of the 1960s. The invention of the birth control pill by Gregory Pincus around the same time made sex more accessible and less feared. This, combined with Kinsey's research, changed how people thought about sex forever. Elvis Presley became a symbol of this new sexual era, though he never openly admitted it. His provocative performances excited young girls and caused whispers among adults. Rumors swirled about his private life, with some speculating he was gay. Despite this, Elvis's influence was undeniable. He showed that sexuality could be a part of public life, even if it was just hinted at. Elvis's relationships were a testament to this changing landscape. From Dixie Locke, his longtime girlfriend who broke up with him over distance, to his various relationships with musicians and actresses, Elvis lived a life that defied the norms of his time. His story mirrored the broader shift in attitudes towards sex and relationships, even if he didn't always speak about it directly. Kinsey's research was a bombshell, revealing the hidden truths of human sexuality. Though met with fierce resistance, his work laid the groundwork for a more open and honest discussion about sex. It showed that what was considered normal was far more diverse than anyone had dared to admit. As society continued to evolve, Kinsey's legacy lived on, helping to shape the sexual revolution and beyond. In the vibrant and tumultuous world of 1950s and early 1960s rock and roll, Elvis Presley was a force of nature, not just on stage but also in his personal life. Elvis's interactions with young fans and women were a significant part of his public image and private life. He enjoyed the company of young girls, not just for their youthful energy, but also to connect with a younger audience. He had close relationships with three 14-year-old girls from Memphis: Gloria Moel, Heidi Heisen, and Frances Forbes. To Elvis, these meetings were more about bonding with young fans and understanding how to connect with that age group than anything else. However, Elvis's personal life took a more serious turn when he met Anita Wood in 1957. At 19, Anita was a glamorous blonde with talents in acting and singing. She recorded Crying in the Chapel and even appeared on a bootleg tape with Elvis joking around while singing Who's Sorry Now. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, however, vetoed their marriage. He believed it could harm Elvis's fan base, which was largely composed of young teenagers. Anita eventually married Johnny Brewer, a Cleveland Browns football player, instead. Elvis's romantic journey didn't end there. During his time in the army in Germany, he had relationships with various women, including the Russian actress Vera Tshachova, dancer Angelika Zehitbauer, and 16-year-old Margit Buogin, whom he affectionately called Little Puppy. These relationships were part of a pattern that showed Elvis's comfort with younger women, though it's essential to note that these interactions were consensual and part of a different cultural context. Elvis's stage performances reflected his views on sexuality and attraction. His music and dances were laden with sexual undertones, from romantic ballads to explicit songs like One Night. He was open about his enjoyment of intimate relationships, though always with consenting adults. There's no evidence that he ever forced himself on anyone, showing a respect for personal boundaries, at least publicly. The issue of Elvis's relationships with young women brings us to a deeper, more complex topic: the cultural attitudes towards such relationships in the 1950s and early 1960s. The term Lolita Syndrome emerged after Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita, which explored a dangerous obsession with a young girl. This theme was also reflected in films like Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of the novel, which, despite its controversial subject matter, was a significant cultural artifact of the time. In the entertainment industry, attitudes towards young fans were different. It was not uncommon for stars to have close relationships with much younger fans, often without the legal or moral scrutiny we see today. Jacques Brel, Serge Gainsbourg, and other artists wrote songs that hinted at or celebrated these relationships. The song Jailbait by Andre Williams, for example, openly flirted with the idea of a relationship with a minor, reflecting a cultural acceptance, or at least tolerance, of such dynamics. Jerry Lee Lewis, another iconic figure of the era, provides a stark example of these attitudes. His personal life was a series of marriages and relationships with young women. Jerry Lee married Dorothy Barton at 16, but soon left her for Jane Mitchum, whom he married while still technically married to Dorothy. This led to a shotgun wedding with Jane. Later, he married Myra Brown, who was initially reported to be 15, though she later claimed to be 16. These marriages were often bigamous or legally questionable, reflecting the changing laws and cultural norms of the time. The legal landscape was rapidly evolving. By 1957, many states in the U.S. were raising the age of consent to 16, though Mississippi was the last to change its laws, setting the minimum age at 15 for women and 17 for men. This change meant that some of Jerry Lee's marriages, like his second one to Myra, were now illegal. Despite the legal and moral complexities, Jerry Lee's attitude towards his relationships was unapologetic. During a press conference in London, he admitted to being a bigamist at 16, claiming he didn't understand the implications at the time. He described his marriages to Dorothy and Jane as mistakes made out of youthful impulsiveness. The cultural context of the 1950s and early 1960s was vastly different from today. Relationships between young celebrities and their fans were viewed with more tolerance, and the legal consequences were often less severe. However, this doesn't excuse the actions of these individuals or the broader societal acceptance of such relationships. It's a reminder of how cultural norms evolve over time, shaped by changing values and legal standards. Elvis Presley's life and relationships highlight the complexities of this era. His interactions with young fans were part of his persona and appeal, but they also reflect a broader cultural acceptance of certain dynamics that would be unthinkable today. As we look back, it's crucial to understand these historical contexts while also recognizing the importance of protecting the rights and well-being of young individuals. The story of Jerry Lee Lewis and the shock he caused in Britain in the late 1950s is a big chapter in music history. It shows how music can stir strong feelings in people, especially when it involves young love and cultural differences. At first, many adults in Britain were furious. They saw Jerry Lee as a bad influence, with his young bride and energetic performances. This anger came from a mix of moral concerns and fear of foreign influence. People in positions of power, like members of parliament, questioned why this American was allowed to perform in the UK. They felt the country already had plenty of homegrown talent. Critics like Eve Perrick accused rock and roll of targeting innocent young minds. Her solution was to tax rock records heavily, making them too expensive for teens to buy. This idea was wild and unrealistic, but it shows how deep the discomfort with rock and roll ran. Jerry Lee's career took a hit initially, but he bounced back with a hit version of Ray Charles' song. His music continued to resonate with fans, even after personal tragedies like the loss of his son. Despite his tough exterior and rocky personal life, Jerry Lee managed to make a comeback. He transitioned to country music in the mid-1960s and has remained a touring star ever since. This part of music history also touches on other artists facing trouble. Chuck Berry faced legal issues in 1959 over allegations of taking a young Native American girl across state lines for immoral purposes. His sentence was initially harsh but later reduced. While in prison, he kept busy learning accounting and writing songs, one of which, The Promised Land, would later be a hit for the Beatles. Chuck Berry's experience shows that even setbacks can lead to growth and new opportunities. Upon his release, he found his popularity had grown, thanks to British bands covering his songs. He continued to innovate, even finding ways to use his accounting skills to his advantage, like during his brief White House visit before serving time for tax evasion. The story of Ben Hewitt, a rockabilly singer, adds another layer. It highlights the dangers of being in the public eye. A man impersonating Hewitt committed a serious crime, which led to confusion and nearly damaged Hewitt's reputation. This incident shows how easy it is for fame to bring unwanted attention and how important it is to manage one's public image. Overall, the Jerry Lee Lewis incident in Britain was a turning point. It marked a clash between traditional values and the exciting new sound of rock and roll. While it caused outrage initially, it also opened doors for artists like Jerry Lee to find new audiences and for rock and roll to become an integral part of popular culture. This period teaches us about the complex relationship between music, culture, and society, how each can shape and challenge the other in unexpected ways.